right. So as you guys are looking at this right here, the Delhi Sultanate is a very, very important one to know about. Yesterday we talked about the spread of Islam, and to one of the places that it spread to was India. But India is where Delhi is. India, Delhi, India, Hindu. Sultanate is the word for ruler or king in Islam. So Islam, not Sultanate Islam, that's not going to work out too well. So you kind of got this combination of the rulers of Delhi, the rulers of this area of India, are going to be Muslim, but the people are Hindu. There's also, you might have heard of the word Delhi before. Delhi is the capital of old India, not New Delhi, which is new, was moved by the British when they controlled India. So New Delhi was actually the capital created by the British. And although the Delhi Sultanate ruled politically, they found it very hard to convert the predominantly Hindu religion because they found some major cultural differences. So this is going to lead to the rise of something called Sufism or Sufi, the Sufis, which is a syncretic religion, which is a mixing of two things to create something new. So yesterday we talked about syncretism. Today we're talking about syncretism when we're creating something new. Eventually, it's kind of began as Indian missionaries who were actually Muslims, but they realized, hey, we're not going to be able to sell this religion to Hindus without taking some elements of Hinduism that are going to relate to the population. Because if you're looking at the similarities there, there's a lot of differences. So Islam has one God, Hinduism has multiple gods. Islam does not have images or idols. Hinduism has many. Islam is really about equality, and Hinduism is about kind of a caste system or a social hierarchy. So basically, these these Muslim Indians who are trying to create kind of like a way to get Hindus or Indians to follow their religion say, listen, you people at the bottom of the caste, you people all the way down there. All right. It's our job. We're going to try to appeal to you because you know what? We don't believe in the caste system. Muslims in Islam does not believe in the caste system. And if you adopt this Sufism or this kind of proto-Muslim religion, you can be a Muslim. You can find a better life. You can have something better for you. All right. So that's kind of what's going on there. You've also got the Empire of Mali, who is in West Africa, which is going to spread rapidly. The Empire of Mali is going to spread rapidly. It's brought along trade routes. The ideas, it wasn't just with the lower class, but the upper class. So the rulers of West Africa really believed in the spread of this religion. There was a guy named Mansa Musa, you might have heard of him before, who is not just the richest man in the world, he was the richest man who ever lived. Just to kind of put it in perspective, Bill Gates' net worth is about $105 billion. Jeff Bezos, the guy who's in charge of Amazon, he has about $114 billion. Caesar Augustus, who was the ruler of Rome, the famous ruler, he was worth about $4.6 trillion in today's money. But Mansa Musa was worth twice that much. $9.6 trillion was his personal net worth, the richest man who ever lived by far. He made most of his money through the control of the trade city of Mali, which had gold, but even more expensive than gold, it had salt, which was super, super expensive. So that was what was going on in India and then West Africa. All right. So some other things to know about. This is some very, very important things. Number one, I'm looking at the cultural and social life. What started to happen was a lot of these Greek literary classics like the Iliad, the Odyssey, the teachings of Aristotle and Socrates, for the most part, these were not major works in Europe. Everyone kind of thinks that this is kind of like what started a lot of the European universities. Well, the European universities didn't start for a long, long time. It's like the 14 or 1500s. And so before that, these books were going to be pretty much lost after the Romans and the Greeks have kind of fallen off the face of the earth. And so it was the Muslims, it was the Islamic world that translated a lot of these books into Arabic, saving this line of thinking. It wasn't really the Europeans. It's interesting because a lot of governments and like forms of government and architecture are all based off Greek and Roman kind of culture, but it wasn't really the Europeans who saved it. It was the Islamic world. Number two, Mathematics from India brought in numerals to the mathematic world. So that's really where a lot of these numerals came from, which is from India. And then those spread to Europe after the Crusades. The Crusades were a major, major transfer of knowledge back to Europe. Number three, you had these paper techniques from China, introduced a currency system. And again, those spread through the Crusades. And so, really, what happened, and one of the things that's kind of interesting about the Crusades, is that they were looking to conquer land, and that isn't really what happened. I mean, they took Jerusalem, they lost Jerusalem, they took Jerusalem, they lost Jerusalem. They didn't really have a long term presence in the Middle East, but the Europeans got so much knowledge that had been saved, so many new technologies, so many new lines of thinking. That came back as an exchange with the Crusade. So definitely not the purpose, but a pretty interesting outcome. We're going to look now at some specific people. Some very, very important people in the Islamic Golden Age. The first one was Nasir al-Din Tusi, who was a Persian mathematician. He's been kind of described as the Muslim Socrates. He's a great, great thinker. He was a mathematician and a cosmologist studying the stars, who had an academy near Tabriz, and he helped kind of like provide a model for the movement of planets that later led to Copernicus kind of discovering the model of the solar system, which is this heliocentric model of the solar system that says that we are revolving around the sun, not vice versa. So way before the Renaissance was Nasir al-Din Tusi who came up with that. Ibn Sina developed a medical system that improved medical care throughout all of Dar al-Islam, where doctors would studies and they would actually be accredited in universities. So before, doctors were kind of medicine men. What starts to happen now is they start to see as actually licensed. This has become a professionalized job. And a lot of those medical practices and those exams are still being used today, although they've been tweaked a little bit. That it's still the same model that came back. Look at that, 980 CE. And number three, the last one, as I'm going to butcher her name, Aisha al-Bayuni, was born a common woman, and eventually she became a very, very respected member of the Turkish court. She wrote about mystical Sufism and was one of the most respected poets in all of Muslim culture. So you got some really, 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 really big names that come out of here that you guys might not have been aware of before, because we focus so much on European scholars and stuff like that. All right, so what we're going to do now is we are going to stop. You're going to share your notes that you got with your partners, and then you're going to check back. So getting back into it, I want you guys to now take a look at this second question and answer this question into the chat. So on the left, we have the Silk Road. The right, we have the Indian Ocean trade, talking about some kind of like commerce and stuff like that. So the world shifts dramatically from the Mediterranean zone, which is right around here, the Mediterranean zone. And this is kind of known to the Indian Ocean. And this is what we call southernization. So southernization is the term that we use when we talk about the center of the world being so centered around the Indian Ocean. So places like the coast of Africa, the Middle East, India, South and Southeast Asia, all these areas down here are where a lot of the trade is happening. So right now we're kind of in a period of what's called westernization, but up until about the 1300s, the 1400s, southernization is really where the power centers of the world were. Islamic society kind of coincidentally or purposely, whether or not this happened by chance or whether or not this was a byproduct of southernizations, the Islamic merchants are as especially around 1200 CE, around 600 years later. Was this a coincidence that they kind of used the trade to spread religion, or was this divine intervention that Islam viewed merchants as a much more prestigious class as they were the center of trade? So luck or not, that played a huge difference in the spread of religion, was them being merchant roles. Two, merchants also played a strong role in spreading the religion. So they kind of took on this secondary title as a merchant missionary. So a lot of times you would have, like in Christianity, you have the class who are just the traders. And you have another group of people who are just the missionaries. They're just the spreading the religion. In Islam, a lot of times those two overlap. They actually have the same job. So oftentimes what we'll do is we'll follow the trade routes, the modern Silk Road, the Indian Ocean, or trade in the Saharan Desert, and the religion almost follows directly along those trade routes. So the spread of trade almost completely follows the spread of the religion. Um, a question to look at is the ancient Silk Road led to China, from China to Rome. The modern Silk Road is different. How? So, taking a look at this picture on the left, how do you know what is different about this? The not dashed lines, the straight lines. Anyone notice any big differences on the left? That picture. Yeah, we've got a lot more ocean trade. What else?
I think some of them are kind of branching out more to Europe for which one was it? The modern Silk Road.
Yeah, we've got the modern Silk Road is going to go to Europe. All right, so we got more trade routes. Europe. Anything else? Yeah, so we got a couple ones that kind of stay the same, which is this one kind of like through northern China and a little bit India. But for the most part, they start to follow major ports around the sea. So I'm guessing what starts to happen is that the sea trade makes a huge, bigger influence, and new cities start to arise with them. As we know, the first one was going through China to and Rome, went through India, from China to Rome, right here. So Rome and China, and then this next one is going to go really specifically from Baghdad all the way through Constantinople. This is Constantinople right here. Is going to play this is like the center of trade in the world because it links east and west right there. All right, let's try another question. This one's a pretty much straightforward, but I want you guys to see if you can answer this one. So either you guys are all 100% brilliant, or you're very confident in the first person who puts the answer down. You're absolutely right. B is the correct answer here, and that's what's going on this one. And the key thing I want you to look at is what is the key word or phrase in the question? Anyone pick up on the question? What are some key words or phrase in that actual question? Yeah, distribution. Absolutely. Is there other ones? Other key phrases? I would also say like best explains. So best explains and then distribution are some of the key phrases that are in the question. So obviously answer B is correct. Muslim merchants equal missionaries. Who did I pick on outside? Cynthia, why is A, C, or D wrong? Pick one of them. Why is one of them wrong?
Um, wait, which one did we say it was? B, right?
Yeah, so B's right. Why is A, C, or D wrong? Just pick one of them.
This migration was wrong because they didn't really like. Oh, I said D is like wrong because they weren't really pushed out, I guess, and they didn't really like push out any um starting groups.
Yeah, so that's perfect. So Islam did not force people to move. There were no major push factors for people to move out of the Middle East really at all to go to Southeast Asia. So that's a big one. If you want to do A,
Yeah. A is because like religious pilgrimages are in the Middle East and around Mecca and Medina, so there are no religious pilgrimages in Southeast Asia.
yeah, that's a great one. So A is a tricky one because religious pilgrimage is a tenet of Islam. So if you knew a little bit about Islam, you might get thrown off. But they're like, wait, yeah, I know they go on pilgrimages, but if you didn't know exactly where they went, that would throw you off. But obviously, the holy sites were not in Southeast Asia; they were in the Middle East, right? All right, Beatrice, you want to do C?
Sure. So for imperialism, some empires would often like want to create territory by sending over military, but that's not what they did. They just sent merchants through like the trade routes to spread the religion of Islam.
Yeah, and for the most part, they also didn't go east, right? Because what's east of the Middle East? So I got a trick question. India and China, and so and remember they did have the Delhi Sultanate, so they did kind of take over parts of India. But China, for the most part, was not going to become a Muslim territory, so it'd be really hard to go that far over there, the Middle East squared. Absolutely, and then also they went a little bit towards southwest North Africa, a little bit, but for the most part, not really. All right, excellent job with that one. Okay, so moving on. Let's talk about what was going on. Oh, that's weird. Why is that so not? Why is it? Whoa. Hey, oh, okay, try again. And that's right. Okay. All right. So let's talk about some common practices, some misconceptions. Um, One of the big things that's going on in this part of the world was slavery. Slavery at this time it's not a concept that is new at this stage in the world in about 600 BC or 600 CE. Almost every ancient empire, going back to the ancient Assyrians, Egyptians, Romans, Babylonians, Greeks, all had slavery. There was one empire that did not have slavery. Anyone know what empire that was? If you had world history last year, you definitely should know. One big ancient empire that did not have slavery. Nope, Mongols absolutely enslaved people. They were enslaving you and then dragging you by the back of the horse. One ancient empire. Nope, Greeks did. Greeks had slaves. Greeks, Romans, all the classic ones. One. There's a famous movie about them. They lose in the movie.
The Spartans?
No, who do they? Nope, Spartans had slaves. You're close, though. You're incredibly close. Not the Athenians. Nope, they had slaves. You're so close with the Spartans. You're so close. Give up? The Persians. The Persians did not have slaves. The movie was 300. And it's kind of ironic, right? What if the roles switched, right? Because Sparta had major slave society. They had many slave revolts. Persians banned slavery. It's pretty ironic that the Persians are the bad guys in the movie, and then the Spartans are the good guys. But that was one of the ones right there. So slavery in the Muslim world, however, was very predominant. Although not discussed nearly as the same, it is thought that just as many people were enslaved in the Eastern slave trade, which was the Middle East and Asia, as were in the Atlantic slave trade, which was the United States and Latin America. It's ironic, when the Atlantic slave trade was abolished, the Eastern slave trade actually expanded, suggesting that for some Africans, the abolition of the Atlantic slave trade didn't actually lead to freedom. It just merely changed where they were going. So it's misleading to use phrases such as Islamic slavery or Muslim slave trade, even though slavery existed in many cultures at the time. Since the Atlantic slave trade is not called like the Christian slave trade, even though those responsible for it were Christians. So that's like a poignant paradox of slavery in Islam, is that the humanity of various rules and customs that led to the freeing of slaves. So because they very much, Islam did not have like long-term slavery like they had in the United States, where you would be into slavery and then your children and your grandchildren. In Muslims, in the Islamic slave trade, or not we're going to call that the Eastern slave trade, what eventually happened was if you were a slave, then your children would be born free. This would be a good thing, but the irony here is that this creates a demand for new slaves that can only be supplied by war, forcing people into slavery or trading slaves. So unlike the Atlantic slave traders, Muslims enslaved people from many cultures, not just Africa, the Balkans, Central Asia, Mediterranean Europe. And under Islamic law, people could only be enslaved under two circumstances. So one is that it was the result of being defeated in a war that was legal according to the Sharia law, and two, if they are born as a child of two slave parents. That was one of them. The second thing that's going on there is what's called Zoroastrianism. Zoroastrianism is a very ancient world religion. It's a monotheistic religion originating out of Persia. It was the major religion of the Achaemenid dynasty or the empire. The founder, Zoroaster, was a real person. He was kind of like a spiritual leader. He laid the foundation for Islam, Christianity, and Judaism. So it's very important to know that a lot of the beliefs that come out of Christianity and Islam and Judaism are very similar to the story. So, for example, the Zoroaster believed in the end that this god, Ahura Mazda, would overcome his enemy in a final battle, destroy all evil, and restore order to the cosmos, joining heaven and earth, which were very similar elements that were used in Christianity and Islam and Judaism. An important element of Zoroaster's vision is like free will. This means that Zoroaster emphasized the moral responsibility of the individual, which is a little different than those religions. And that's kind of a paradox. And a lot of religions have struggled with the idea of free will in many religions, because a lot of religions would say that God knows everything. He's got all the knowledge of the future and thus knows every choice that you're going to make. Because God's knowledge is perfect, he cannot make a different choice, and therefore there's no free will. So on the other side, though, people would say a God with free will can make different choices based on the knowledge of the future, and therefore God's knowledge of the future is imperfect or limited or wrong. So that's kind of an interesting idea, this idea of free will that comes from those different religions. But Zoroastrianism, the foundation for those different religions that are going to be built off monotheism. All right. A couple of different things. I'm gonna fly here. Okay, free women in Islam. All right, so it's been a pretty sensitive issue recently, but it recently received a great deal of attention due to legislation that was passed. Several European countries like France and Germany that ban the use in government institutions as well as educational institutions. So for women who wear hijab out of religious belief, the truth is obvious and for them pretty indisputable. For others who don't understand what the hijab is, it can kind of be confusing. It's important to understand that several points related to the hijab and kind of where they come from and this idea of modesty. The first point is that modesty had been the norm for women in history up until basically the past 100 years for pretty much every woman everywhere. So if one to look at history books at different times, you would find very modest covering of women in almost every single society. And a message given to the Prophet Muhammad was actually the order of the hijab. So this is a very core tenet of the religion. It's like following the orders of Jesus if you're a Christian, or Abraham, Moses in Judaism. It's more than a symbol of saying, hey, I'm Muslim. It's actually like part of the faith of being Muslim. And when a woman is wearing a hijab, she's not submitting to man, which is kind of how we view it in the West, but she's submitting to God. And so that's a pretty important component about what's going on with the hijab and why it's so misunderstood in Western culture. Muhammad actually raised the status of women, which was actually lowered at the time because of the agricultural revolution. So farming really separated the gender roles. So Muslim women actually had higher status than Christian or Jewish women, who were actually allowed to own property, could remarry, they could even practice birth control. So then this idea of inequality kind of came up a little bit later. And that's where we're going to have to stop. Oh, crap. I ran out of time. Again, I'm blaming this on Nearpod. I do want to finish this last one because it's pretty important, but I guess we'll have to finish it tomorrow real quick. All right. With that being said, yeah, Pear Deck is whack. The homework for tonight is going to be, we're going to do some check-ins tomorrow, is we're going to start talking about South and Southeast Asia. So on your slides, there is one there that says what's going on in South and Southeast Asia, pages 23 to 29. You're going to write some major takeaways, vocab words, definitions, and right there. So and you're going to come back and highlight those. All right, so tonight you're going to highlight your notes from today, and